He was the first African American to win the Heisman Trophy, college football's highest honor. He met the president, signed the richest rookie contract in NFL history, and was destined to form a dream backfield with the legendary Jim Brown. He had reached the summit, and then he never played a single professional game. This is the story of Ernie Davis, the greatest football player you've never seen, and the tragedy that stole his future just as it had begun. His story begins in the gritty cold fields of southwestern Pennsylvania, where men descended into darkness each morning and prayed they'd see daylight again. Ernest R. Davis entered this world on December 14th, 1939, in the small town of New Salem. His father was already lost to a workplace accident before Ernie was born. His mother, Avis, was just 21. 14 months later, she made the heartbreaking decision that would shape her son's destiny. She placed little Ernie in the care of his grandparents, Willie and Elizabeth Davis, in Uniontown, Pennsylvania. He became the 13th child crowded into their 8-room house across from the housing projects. Willie Davis knew about survival. For 42 years, he worked in the coal mines 6 days a week, surviving 3 cave-ins along the way. Once he was buried underground for 4 days before rescue crews reached him. This was the man who would teach young Ernie that courage meant getting up every morning and doing what needed to be done. In the Davis household, Elizabeth ruled with love and an iron hand. The family had little money but rich values: discipline, faith, and the belief that character mattered more than circumstances. It was here that young Ernie absorbed these lessons while developing his own challenge to overcome. He stuttered terribly as a child, so severely that his Uncle Chuck, 2 years his elder, often had to serve as his interpreter. Teachers wrote on his report cards that Ernest did his lessons well but never asked questions. Chuck also recalled humorous aspects of Ernie's childhood stuttering problem. From the book Ernie Davis, The Elmira Express, The Story of the Heisman Trophy by Robert C. Gallagher, published in 2008. The Davis boys played in the woods near their house. A favorite trick was to run along the trail and snap a sapling back on those behind. One day, Chuck snapped it back on Ernie, who fell to the ground crying. Since he had never seen Ernie cry before, Chuck assumed he was badly hurt. Not wanting to be punished, he ran home first and told his mother Ernie had fallen out of a tree and hurt himself. Shortly thereafter, Ernie came slowly walking down the street crying and holding his wrist. With all the excitement his appearance caused, he was only able to stutter, "Tree." Everybody assumed that he had fallen out of a tree, as Chuck had said. Even after the commotion subsided, he never did tell anyone the true story of what had happened, much to Chuck's relief. But Ernie attacked this limitation with the same determination his grandfather showed in the mines. Each night he'd sit with his school books and sports magazines, reading aloud over and over until he could pronounce every word without hesitation. The family's one luxury was a radio. It connected him to the wider world, where he heard the exploits of heroes who had risen from these same Pennsylvania hills. As he listened, a dream took shape. Sports could be his path out, his tunnel to daylight. In 1951, when Ernie was 12, his life took another dramatic turn. His mother had remarried and established a stable home in Elmira, New York. The time had come for her son to join her. Elmira in the 1950s offered a different face of American racism than the Jim Crow South. The 1953 Negro Motorist Green Book, that essential guide for black travelers, listed exactly one haven in the city. But while black families couldn't eat at certain restaurants or stay at certain hotels, their children could at least attend integrated schools. At Elmira Free Academy, the boy who had struggled to speak now let his body do the talking. In just 13 football games, he rushed for over 1,300 yards and scored 138 points. On the basketball court, he led his team to 52 consecutive victories. By graduation, he had earned 11 varsity letters. By his senior year, more than 50 colleges were pursuing him. But Syracuse University had an advantage: Jim Brown, the NFL legend who had his own complex history with the university, made the trip to Elmira. He sat in the Davis living room and spoke honestly about the racism he'd faced, but also about the platform Syracuse had given him. When Ernie committed to Syracuse and announced he would wear number 44, Brown's number, everyone understood. The greatest runner in Syracuse history was passing the torch. The Syracuse coach, Ben Swartzwelder, was a tough World War II paratrooper who wasn't interested in social causes. He wanted to win football games. Yet something about Ernie Davis melted the coach's heart. He'd knock you down, Swartzwelder would later say, but then he'd run back and pick you up. We'd never had a kid so thoughtful and polite. The 1959 team's dominance was absolute. They led the entire nation in multiple statistical categories, including total offense, scoring offense, total defense, and rushing defense, which was only allowing an astonishing 19.3 yards per game. Davis was the engine of the offense, leading the team with 686 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns, averaging a school record 7 yards per carry. An Elmira sports writer, watching one dominant performance, coined a nickname that would last forever: the Elmira Express. Through their perfect 10-game regular season, the Orangemen outscored the opposition by a staggering margin of 413 to 73. Their average margin of victory was 33 points. They steamrolled opponents, including a 35-0 thrashing of Pitt. The season's pivotal moment came on November 7th in a showdown against undefeated 7th-ranked Penn State. In a hard-fought contest, Davis scored a crucial touchdown that helped secure a tight 20-18 victory. The win propelled Syracuse to the number 1 ranking in the country, a position they would not relinquish. Syracuse demolished their Final Four opponents, earning a trip to the Cotton Bowl in Dallas to face number 2 Texas for the national championship. The game would become a defining moment in Davis's career, showcasing both his immense talent and the ugly reality of racism in America. On the field, Davis was heroic. Despite pulling a hamstring before the game, he delivered an MVP performance. On just the 3rd play from scrimmage, he took a halfback option pass from team captain Ger Sveda and raced 87 yards for a touchdown, a play that remains a Cotton Bowl record. He later scored another touchdown on a short run and made a critical interception that set up Syracuse's final touchdown. The Orangemen won 23-14, cementing their status as national champions. This triumph, however, was set against a backdrop of shocking racial hostility. Life magazine of January 11, 1960 described an ugly undercurrent of racial bitterness throughout the game. The Syracuse players became enraged, and according to the Life article, what enraged them most was that much of Texas' dirty play seemed to be directed toward Syracuse's Negro players. Once, when he was plowing through the line, said Negro fullback Art Baker, "One of them spit right in my face." John Brown, a Negro lineman, played nose-to-nose against 235-pound Texas tackle Larry Stevens. To goad him off balance, Brown claimed Stevens kept calling him a big black dirty N-word. Finally, Brown warned him not to call him that again. When Stevens did, Brown swung. Afterwards, Stevens apologized to Brown, but Brown had already forgiven him. "That Texas boy was just excited," he said. "Let's forget it." The situation grew so volatile that Coach Swartzwelder had to come onto the field to protect his players. The conflict extended beyond the final whistle. The post-game awards banquet, meant to be a celebration of victory, became another site of humiliation. As the game's MVP, Davis was to be honored. Accounts of the incident vary slightly in their details, but the core injustice is consistent. Davis and his black teammates were informed that, due to the facility segregation policy, they would be required to leave immediately after accepting their awards. One popular version of the story holds that the entire Syracuse team decided to boycott the banquet in solidarity. However, a more detailed account from teammate John Brown clarifies that while Coach Swartzwalder did suggest a full team walkout, Syracuse University officials overruled him to avoid creating a larger public scene. Instead, the three black players were quietly escorted out after the meal and taken to a separate event hosted by the local NAACP chapter. This incident starkly illustrated that for black pioneers like Ernie Davis, victory on the field did not guarantee dignity or acceptance off it. The next 2 years brought more glory. Ernie averaged an incredible 7.8 yards per carry as a junior. Off the field, he made another pioneering choice, becoming the first African American member of a historically Jewish fraternity, Sigma Alpha Mu. His senior season in 1961 was his masterpiece. He rushed for over 800 yards, caught passes, returned kicks, and even threw a touchdown. The season culminated at the Liberty Bowl, where Syracuse trailed Miami 14-0 at halftime. Davis put the team on his back. He carried the ball 30 times for 140 yards, grinding out tough yardage and scoring the team's first touchdown to spark the comeback. Syracuse rallied to win 15-14, and Davis was named the game's most valuable player, a fitting end to his legendary career in an orange uniform. On November 28, 1961, history was made. Ernie Davis became the first African American to win the Heisman Trophy. Days later, he received another honor, an invitation to meet President John F. Kennedy. Think about that journey a moment, from a house with no father in the coal fields of Pennsylvania to a handshake with the most powerful man in the world. Emerging from the meeting, Ernie was in awe. Imagine that, the President of the United States wanting to meet me. I got to shake hands with him. That was almost as big a thrill as winning the Heisman. He was on top of the world. His pro career promised even greater glory. What happened next is the part of his story that no one saw coming. On December 4th, 1961, Ernie Davis was selected as the number 1 overall pick in the National Football League draft by the Washington Redskins. The Redskins were owned by the notoriously racist George Preston Marshall, who had steadfastly refused to integrate his team, making it the last all-white franchise in the league. Marshall's hand was forced. The Redskins were set to play in the new federally owned D.C. Stadium, later renamed RFK Stadium. The Kennedy administration, through Interior Secretary Stuart Udall, delivered an ultimatum: sign a black player by the start of the 1962 season, or the team's 30-year stadium lease would be revoked. Unable to bring himself to personally make the pick, Marshall delegated the decision to his general manager, who selected Davis. Aware of Marshall's history and unwilling to be a pawn in this political drama, Davis refused to play for Washington and immediately demanded a trade. He was sent to Cleveland to team up with his idol, Jim Brown. All that was left was a routine physical. Davis signed what was, at the time, the most lucrative contract ever given to an NFL rookie. The 3-year deal was worth a total of $200,000, which included an $80,000 salary, a $15,000 signing bonus, and additional compensation for marketing rights and off-season employment. The dream backfield of Jim Brown and Ernie Davis was never to be. In the summer of 1962, while preparing to play in the college All-Star game in Chicago, Davis woke one morning with a swollen neck and was hospitalized. After initial suspicions of mumps or mononucleosis, he was diagnosed with acute monocytic leukemia, a form of blood cancer that was considered incurable at the time. In 1962, it was a death sentence. Ernie Davis was 22 years old. Though he would never play in a regular season game, Davis had one final unforgettable moment in the spotlight. During a preseason game at Cleveland Stadium, he was allowed to suit up in his number 45 jersey and run onto the field with the team during introductions. As a single spotlight followed him, the crowd of nearly 85,000 erupted in a thunderous emotional ovation. On May 18, 1963, Ernie Davis succumbed to his illness. He was 23 years old. The death of Ernie Davis sent shockwaves across the country, prompting a massive outpouring of grief that affirmed his status as a national figure. In Elmira, over 10,000 mourners filed past his casket at the neighborhood house to pay their last respects. The tributes from the highest levels of government were unprecedented for such a young athlete. Both houses of Congress eulogized him on the congressional record, and President Kennedy's statement praised him as a man of great character who served as an inspiration. Syracuse University, the place where he became a legend, retired the fabled number 44 jersey in 2005 to honor the legacy of the three men who made it famous: Jim Brown, Ernie Davis, and Floyd Little, whom Davis had recruited. The Cleveland Browns retired number 45. Elmira renamed its junior high school Ernie Davis Academy, and he was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. There are many more accolades, but you get the idea. More than 60 years later, at that school bearing his name, children learn about the boy who couldn't speak in class but became a voice for change. They learn that barriers exist to be broken, that dignity defeats hatred, and that character matters more than circumstances. I'm curious to hear from you. What's the most impactful part of Ernie Davis' legacy? Was it breaking the Heisman barrier or the incredible dignity he showed in his final days? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. In the end, the Elmira Express ran for just 23 years, but its journey echoes through time. Ernie Davis' life is proof that a life well lived, however brief, can light the way for others long after the runner has crossed the final goal line. Now, all that, and I didn't even mention the movie about Ernie Davis, The Express. I don't remember seeing it, so perhaps in the future I'll start doing videos about football movies, separating fact from fiction. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our playlist on other great players in college football history. This is John Johnston with Hardcore College Football History. Thank you for watching.